Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome back to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast Summer Shorts series, where we are getting the super nerdy details on specific subjects all summer long while we gear up for Season 3 of the podcast in October. As promised, we wanted to get some info up this summer about collaborative farming. So Jackson called our buddy Dan Brisebois of Tournesol farm to hear all the details on that cooperative there in Quebec. Tournesol has been operating for 15 years as a cooperative, and Dan talks about the benefits of cooperative farming, the challenges, but also some of the interesting details surrounding how it's structured. Super cool conversation, very inspiring. Of course, we could not bring it to you without the help of you. You, our patrons, are the ones that keep this going. This summer series is entirely a thank you to the people who support our work. You can sign up at patreon.com/farmerjesse for less than the price of a bunch of radishes every month, and at a certain level, or if you just bump up your patronage from one level to another, or even just $1, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Travis and Heidi of Arcadia Acres, Kevin Keene, Ryan Gosser, Jean-Martin Fortier, Dan Brisebois, Yannick Laplante, Brian Hoskin, Chris Veretto, David Cienema, Jason Oman, and Troy Hinkie. Thank you to all of our Patreon members, and thank you to anyone who just kicks us a few bucks over there at Venmo, to @NoTillGrowers, or even just shares the show. All of that is appreciated. So consider signing up, patreon.com/farmerjesse, to support our work. All right, enough for me. Let's get into Jackson's awesome conversation with Dan Brisebois of Tournesol Cooperative Farm.
Dan Brisebois, thank you for taking a minute during the busy growing season. Right now I'm talking to you at the beginning of June, so everything is starting to pick up. CSAs are starting to come into their own this time of year. So thanks for taking a second to talk to us about farm cooperative models. I'm really excited about this conversation, so thank you.
It's a real pleasure. I'm also really excited about talking about this. I think it's a really important option for farms.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really considering cooperative models now. You've been running a cooperative farm or co-running a cooperative farm since 2005. So Tournesol has been going for about 15 years now. So obviously you're doing something right. Something is working. But first, just for a little bit of context, can you back up and give us an overview of your farm, the size, the scale, what enterprises you have going on there, and how many people are co-partners or owners or whatever you want to call them in Tournesol Farm?
All right. So we're outside of Montreal. We start with that. We're west of Montreal, so we're in a Canadian context, about 45 minutes west of Montreal. And our farm is 17 acres, 12 acres of which we own and 5 acres of which we rent. And of that 17 acres, there's about 12 acres tilled in any one year, with 7 acres in cash crops, so crops that we're selling, and 5 acres in cover crops for our longer-term rotation. And in the cash crops, we grow about 6 acres of vegetables, which we distribute through a 500-member CSA. And at this point, we don't do farmers markets. We just have a 500-member CSA program. And then the other acre that we grow on is we produce seeds, and we have a seed company. And we also buy in seeds from other seeds. We also buy in seeds from other seed growers to resell. So we produce something like 50 to 70% of the seeds we sell. And as you get bigger, it gets smaller. Just you don't have enough space to grow everything. And so our business at this point is probably about 60% vegetables, 40% seeds, but the seeds are really expanding. So it's in the next couple of years, it'll probably flip so that there's more seeds being sold than vegetables. And then in terms of the people, we have 9 people who work in our vegetable enterprise, and we have 5 people who work in our seed enterprise. And of those people, so that's 15 people total, 7 of those people are co-op members, 5 of which have been with us from the beginning, and 2 have joined in recent years. And then we have an additional 8 people who are not members, but are employees of the co-op.
When you started thinking about farming for a living, where did you get the idea of cooperative farming, and how did that begin, and where
we all studied agriculture at university, and that's where we met each other, the five original members who started at Tournesol. And all of us were interested in agriculture really from an ecological perspective, but also from like a food security and social justice perspective also. And so we wanted to get into farming not to run a business, but more to be, part of the change towards a world that we wanted to live in. And that's really what was moving us forward. And part of our we had a lot of ideals about running organizations democratically and being very egalitarian in whatever structure we would set up. And so we chose the co-op model because that's the goal of a co-op model. And we didn't know a lot about the ins and outs of running it, the financial impact, but it was really an ideological decision. And I'm really glad that we did choose that. It's really been a good option for us. I think what also helped us out is that we were a group of close friends who really got into farming, really excited about it. And we, at the end of our university degrees, we started working on farms, and we got to a point after a few years where a number of us were ready to start working on farms, and kind of we're all at the same period, and that's where we just decided to work together. It just seemed easier to do something together rather than start a bunch of separate farms. And that kind of also really helped out the process, having that group to go with.
If you don't mind me asking, how is the farm organized on paper? So you say you started it with 5 people. How is that equity or that ownership shared among the members?
So if you want to run a farm cooperatively or collectively, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Without being our business structure, we registered our business structure as a cooperative. And I know some of the business structures are a little bit different in the U.S. than in Canada.
Sure.
But essentially, running as a co-op is very similar to running as if you're incorporated as a co-op. And one of the important things about a co-op is that each person has one vote at the annual general or at the annual members meeting. Each person has one vote, independent of how many shares they own in the business. And that's really the basis of sort of equality, that each person just owns. Like, so in our case, at the beginning, we were 5 members. Each of us owned 1/5 of the business. And now we're 7 members, and you say each of us, maybe own is the wrong word. Each of us only has 1/7 of a say in what's happening. And that's really at the basic level of just the membership. From the membership, the members vote in a board of directors, and that board of directors is what kind of is like the upper management of the co-op. And in our case, we have 7 directors on the board of directors, and we have 7 members, so all the members on the board of directors. So we have a board of directors then who makes decisions together about the big picture of the farm. And then we've broken up the farm into a number of departments, and each department is run by 1 or 2 people. And within the department, the director who runs that department is the one who makes, I guess, the final decisions about what's happening, but it's always in context of what the vision from the board of directors is. So I run the seed operations, and so I'm figure out what we're going to grow, how we're going to sell it, and that kind of stuff with the seeds, but it's always in view of the bigger picture. If I was to use like a real change, or let's say Renee runs the vegetable production part of the farm. If she wanted to, change and only go tomatoes and do them wholesale, that was something that had to be discussed at a board level before we do that. And I don't know if there'd be a lot of enthusiasm for that. But smaller decisions, she makes continuously to make sure that things keep going and things work. So there's a few different levels. There's like the membership, there's the board of directors, and then there's the departments, and then the people working in the department. And at each of those, there's a sphere of influence, and then sort of a responsibility, and also kind of some independence or autonomy that exists in each of those levels.
so you started with 5 members, and then you said that you added 2 more recently. What is the process, or what is your process? Because I know these can be set up in so many different ways. What is your process for, say, allowing new employees or new people to become members and able to make long-term decisions in the farm?
So what we've set up, and it's taken us a while to kind of work out the kinks, and I guess we're still working out the kinks, and will be continuously. But when somebody works for Tournesol, after 18 months, so a year and a half of working for us, they can make a request to become what's called an auxiliary member, and then the board can choose to accept or refuse this request. And if they choose to accept the request, then that person becomes an auxiliary member for, I think it's 18 months. It's either 18 months or 2 years, and it's kind of like a test phase, like a probationary period, to make sure that they're a good fit with the co-op at that point. Because once they become members, they'll probably start being involved in more decision making and present more of the meetings and kind of see if everybody's on the same page, or if they're willing to come on the same page. And so at the end of that period, 18 months or 2 years, the auxiliary member can then make a formal request to become a full member. And at that point, the board of directors again makes a decision whether to accept a member or not. And once they've been accepted at that point, then they're a full member, and they have all the same rights and responsibilities as any other member of the co-op. Is that? Am I missing a little? Is that clear as a process?
No, that's clear. That makes sense. So it's really a time to see if that individual not only understands the inner workings of the farm and the pace and the atmosphere, but then also understands the vision of the farm and can enact their understanding of the vision of the farm. Because cooperative or not, you do want people that share the same vision.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's the vision. It's a little bit of does it fit in terms of like the way that we want the farm to communicate with each other? And I guess it's a lot about culture. Is it the right culture for? Is this person the right individual in that? Like we're on our farm. We're not 100% consensus-based decision-making, but we do want people to be able to listen and see what other people are saying and consider it, really well before they make a decision. And as much as possible, we want to be all on the same page when we finally make a decision. We don't, we may have come from different places initially, but we want to be able to rally together around what we're doing, what the farm is. And that's really important. We want a team player. People want people to just blindly follow, but we do want people to help build towards what we want.
Right. It's like you want people to bring their own strengths and their expertise to the table. But at the same time, you also want enough buy-in and enough shared vision to know that maybe a decision doesn't 100% fall in your favor, but you do understand that it contributes to the overall vision and overall progression of the farm. And that oftentimes is probably more important than you getting your way in a particular instance.
Totally, that's right on.
Yeah. Let's jump into that a little bit. So that might be one of the challenges. Is myself on my farm, it's a small operation, and I'm the owner, and I make all of the decisions. Now, whether or not that's a good or bad thing is up for debate, but at the very least, it's what I say goes. So maybe not getting, your idea enacted on the farm is one of the challenges of working cooperatively. What are some of the other challenges that you've encountered?
I think that for some people in a co-op, this loss of ultimate decision-making power might really be the hardest thing. And but it should be clear, I want to also clarify that it depends what level of vision you're talking about in a co-op. Because, like, in the seed department, I run a seed department, and I have a lot of say on what happens at that level. As long as I stay within budget, as long as we're hitting our financial targets, as long as we're able to maintain a good quality of life for the team, like, it's very easy for me to kind of to have a big influence in that department that I run. Whereas at these days, I no longer work in the vegetable crew, so I don't have a lot of influence on that, so I might have opinions. And so, like, related to this, a big challenge with the co-op is that it's not so much that, each person can't get what they want. It's that you have to talk to other people and to get to that point, and you have to convince them of what you want. And so what I think it really does work in the co-op is I think it slows down some of the decision-making process, because we have a bunch of different individuals who have different perspectives, and when something new comes on the table, there's probably at least two competing visions that will come forward. And in some topics, some people just don't care, and they're just happy for things to go forward. But on a lot of things, there'll kind of be two distinct poles, or maybe even three distinct poles, of where people want to go. And we don't want to force anybody to do something that they really don't believe in and that they really don't want. So it means that we have to take longer to talk through things. And by longer, I don't mean necessarily sit down for like 10 hours, but rather, during a monthly meeting, we talk about something for 45 minutes. We hear what each other's thinking, and then we just listen, or we speak also, but we're not making decisions then. And then the next month, when we have another meeting, we come back and we talk about that again, but maybe we go to a further point, or somebody has summarized some of the key points that came out the first point and figure out what some of the friction might have been, and we kind of work through what some of those issues were or some of the different alternatives. And it's gradually going through, taking the time to do that, really. So this is the disadvantage part, is that, if you have an idea and you are sure this is the best idea for the farm, but you don't have buy-in from your co-farmers, it's probably not going to happen, or not happen in the short term. And so that can be frustrating, especially if you think it's the best idea ever. But what happens when it goes through this process of being explored and discussed together is, one, you figure out, you'll often see whether there's something maybe that wasn't considered initially, and maybe there's a big flaw in your fantastic idea or my fantastic idea, and it gets fleshed out more because we have to work it through other people. And by the time we finally come to a solution, it'll be a much more solid and stronger solution than if it had just been an instinctive decision that happened. And so it can be really frustrating to have to slow down and listen to other people, but ultimately it creates a better, more solid farm. And I think, most, like, a lot of the big decisions that we've had, from the moment they first were brought forward to the team, it can take like 2 or 3 years to really come to the final decision of that. And I mean, that's not like everything. That's not like if we're going to buy a $2,000 piece of equipment. That's not a 3-year process of discussion. But on certain things where there's going to be a big change, it can take 2 or 3 years to kind of work through all the iterations of it. And in that 3rd year, we're kind of on that project, and it'll be a much better project than had we just jumped into it initially. And that could mean that we might miss on certain types of opportunities, but I think that it does mean we have a much more stable, medium and long-term momentum. And but also it does mean, it means that we learn how to listen and trust, and then not be so attached to what we're doing. And then sometimes when something really big happens in the short term, we might make decisions a lot quicker because we've learned how to do this. And like, so with this COVID-19 experience that we're all going through, when the school shut down and all this stuff started to happen, we started meeting weekly, the following week, and we had different perspectives on what to do. But over the next 5-6 weeks, we really rallied together and got a plan forward. It wasn't necessarily what any individual of us wanted, but that was a good plan. So that's a lot quicker than 3 years. And so that's kind of what happens a bit as we've learned to work together. We've figured out when we really have to make a decision quickly, we're much better at doing it also.
Right. It seems like one of the greatest challenges for cooperative farming, and maybe sacrificing a little bit of that independence, is actually on the other side of that coin. One of the greatest strengths of the farm and one of its sources of resilience is having more perspectives at the table. And I know I get crazy ideas about my farm all the time that I wish I would have thought about more, or wish I had fleshed out more before I put it into place. And then there are often times myself when I've been in a situation on the farm where I have not wanted to make the final call about a particular situation, where I would love to sacrifice a little bit of that independence so that I could maybe focus on something that was more in my wheelhouse or my strength or something that I enjoyed. It can be very tiring, especially at the height of the season when everything's happening and you're in the field all day, to turn around and make 100% of all of the decisions about that farm, because you're fatigued. You're in the middle of the season. You're tired. You've got a lot going on. And it's like decision fatigue. There are too many decisions to make for one person to be able to have good judgment about all of those. So even sharing some of that with other people, to me, sounds like an asset or a benefit of being able to put some of the responsibility onto somebody else, or somebody else be able to take up the reins on a particular enterprise or a project, to sort of free up some mental space or some labor, so that you can focus on fewer things and do a better job at those fewer things. It seems to me to be a more healthy way to approach something as multifaceted as a farm, especially when you've got more than one enterprise.
I fully agree with that, and for a long time, that's one of the strongest, or one of the biggest strengths of running a co-op, is that I only have to wear a few farmer hats. I don't have to wear all the hats that somebody who runs the business with 1 or 2 people has to do. Like, so, I don't do the taxes, I don't do the certification. I don't plan the harvest in the morning. I don't have to maintain the tractors. I don't have to. There's just so many things that I'm not thinking about. But then the things that I am thinking about, I can really think about well. And what's also nice about the things I'm not thinking about, I know, because we've been together for 15 years, I know these things are in the hands of people who will do them well. And it's possible that if I had to do them, I would do them differently, or I think there might be a way I'd rather they happen. But I know that they will still happen really well, because they're people who I've seen them do them well over the last 15 years, and so that is a real strength of the co-op, and it really you talk about decision fatigue, and I totally know what you're talking about, and especially as you progress, it's harder and harder to get through. Or not harder and harder to get through, but it's you just more and more things that you have to work on immediately without thinking about when the organic inspector is going to come, or what taxes you have to remit, or this or that. And it definitely is nice to know that someone else is not dropping the ball while I'm focused on my set of responsibilities.
Right. Right, and speaking to that, so you talk about like generating a morning harvest list, or making sure that financial records are up to date. How do you all? So you mentioned that you've got an annual meeting where you make long-term decisions, and then it sounds like you all check in about every month for ongoing business. How do you decide day-to-day work within that operation? within your farm. So say you've got CSA harvest going on one week and several different other projects going on, or maybe your enterprise needs something done on a given week. How do you decide on a week-to-week basis what's going to happen, or on a daily basis who's going to do what, and prioritizing some of those tasks?
That's a really important question, and it's something that has evolved a lot over the years, and it's changed depending how many people were on the farm. Because at the beginning, there was just the 5 of us. Like the first 3 years, there was just the 5 of us. And then our 3rd year, we hired our first employee. And then for a number of years, we were just 1 or 2 employees, and it was just the 5 of us. So it was much easier to kind of throw things back and forth and make all the decisions together. We were also a smaller business. At this point, our business has gotten to be pretty big compared to what it was before. And we have a lot of people, and we have to be tighter than we were years ago. Just, every moment counts a little bit more. I mean, it always counts, but it counts a little bit more. And so our farm has evolved a bit in function of that. And that's where, like I mentioned earlier, that we have 6 departments, and each of those departments is kind of like a sphere of activity. And within that department, it's different ways that things will happen. And so probably, if you talk about the vegetable part of the business, the vegetable enterprise, the most important stuff is, the harvest and all the growing. And so that, Emily, my wife, is the harvest manager, and Renee she manages the vegetable production. And so there's a lot of discussion between Emily and Renee about what's happening. And we talk with all the different people. But Emily, she'll prepare the harvest list, the night before and over the days before an actual harvest. And then Monday through Thursday mornings, people show up, and Emily leads the harvest meeting, and then divides up different groups, and we'll get some different crop leaders who go out and harvest, and different people. And Emily's ultimate goal, or Emily's ultimate responsibility, is to make sure, that the harvest stays on track, and if we're missing something, she's the one who's going to make a decision about what we might replace it with. And she makes sure all the records and all that stuff will get gathered, even to someone else filling out the paperwork. So that's Emily that runs that. And then after lunch, at this time of the year at least, is when Renee takes over. And so everybody meets in front of a big blackboard, and Renee will lead the food through what we're going to be doing in terms of weeding and planting. And she runs sort of all the vegetable production stuff. And so at that meeting, and the same with the harvest meeting, but at the vegetable production meeting, everybody in the vegetable crew is standing around the board, and Renee would start off by sort of running through. On Monday, she talks about the week in general, and then every other day, she'll be talking about what's happening that specific day. And she kind of gives a bigger picture and then assigns tasks. And now she has talked to different people outside of this meeting to make sure that this is the right big picture. But this meeting is also a place where people kind of draw attention to things that might have been forgotten or things that weren't known. And so there's a place to adjust it. But Renee's the one who will make the big decisions about how we're adjusting things. And then each crew will head out, we'll break up into a couple different crews, and they'll head out and they'll do their own stuff, and there'll be someone in that kind of making some of the decisions. But really at the vegetable production meeting, Renee's the one leading that. Now, historically, the vegetable and seed crews would kind of work together and do different things at different times, or they were integrated at the meeting, but we've actually, over time, as the seed crews gotten bigger and there's more seed tasks, we now have a separate seed crew meeting and a separate vegetable crew meeting. And this year's a little bit different because of the pandemic. The seed crew's a little bit before, I'm only able to do that half the time because I'm spending a lot of time with the kids. So it's a little bit less organized than we would love it to be, but normally on Monday afternoon, the seed crew would walk through the field and look at all the crops because, where the crops are at is really important for the seed production. And then we set the priorities for the week, and then we divvy up. So there'd be kind of a separate meeting there. And so that's like kind of a big way that the farm is running from day to day and week to week. But there's like a whole other realm that's taking place in the office. So Fred, who does work a fair amount in the field, he also does like all the bookkeeping. He does a lot of the communications with the CSA members. So that's something that he's running his own time on that, and he's deciding what happened. And there was a time where him and I would talk a little bit about communications, but in the last year or so, it's kind of really become his thing. And when I'll be dealing with communication with the seed clients, and as time progresses, there's less time to consult on everything. Is that enough detail, or is there a specific place you'd like me to highlight more?
Yeah, no, I think it's on the one hand, when you hear that at first, when I hear that at first, what I hear is a lot of meetings. A lot of time in front of a blackboard we're doing this. But then I also think, the days where I do best are days where I take an hour either the night before or the morning of and really get a good handle on prioritizing the day, what needs to happen, what is most important, what can be left to tomorrow or to next week even. So it sounds like spending a little bit of time beforehand to really get the machines working well, to get everybody on the same page, to make sure that everybody's time is being used very wisely. Then you can use that hour or 2 hours a day to make sure that everybody knows their position. And I really like the idea of, at the beginning of the week, letting people know the vision for the week and keep everyone in touch with the day-to-day operations and how they contribute to the ultimate vision of the farm. I think that's great.
If I could just interject something.
Absolutely.
So one of the things, like just kind of like three phases in this decision-making and action paradigm, and the meeting part where people communicate is kind of phase two. So I think what really makes this system work well is sort of before that meeting, the director who's running whatever meeting we're talking about, be it harvest or veg or seed, that director is almost always thinking about the big picture and making lists of where we're at and making decisions and prioritizing. And it's kind of like you mentioned, sitting down an hour at the end of the day or before the day begins to prepare. The director who's going to lead that meeting, that's a really important part for them to do, is that they've done a lot of the reflection and thinking. And because that's really like you have one specific domain that they're working within, they can really focus on that, and they're not worried about a lot of other conflicting priorities. And so they have to come to that meeting having thought through what the best actions are. And so the meeting begins as a communication meeting. The meeting is not like the meeting itself is not the reflection. And so ideally, a lot of the meetings are less than 10 minutes. Like the Monday morning can be a little bit longer, and then Friday we take a little bit longer also because we do an activity where people kind of just give some feedback, a rose, thorn, bud activity. But normally, we're kind of aiming for like less than 10 minutes because there shouldn't be a lot of surprises that come out of these meetings. The director will have thought through the surprises before or look to try to get the information about surprises before the meeting actually begins. So there's that kind of reflection and planning. That'd be the first phase, and the next phase would be the meeting, and the third phase would actually be doing the stuff. And I think that like some of this comes because we're a co-op that we need to kind of have communication, but some of it also comes to the size of our business. Like if it was just Emily and I running this farm at the size it is right now, we would have to hire different field managers and different harvest managers, and they would also have to have sort of take on some of these responsibilities the same way that different co-op members are taking them right now.
Let me stop you right there. So how do you feel that farming cooperatively and having the decision-making process and the equity set up as you do, how do you feel like that's different from maybe you and Emily running the farm and having 3 to 4 other farm managers that are running day-to-day operations sort of from the top down? How do you feel that is how do you feel that the cooperative model is different than that? And how do you feel like it has improved your quality of life on and off the farm to do it cooperatively instead of just that top-down farm manager model?
Yeah, so that's another great question, and it's an important one because there's a certain level that where we are right now might just look at the organizational structure of just a big business versus a co-op farm. There's kind of like a similarity, but I think one of the big things, and this is something that was present right from the beginning, is that there's more people who are committed to the long game. And so in our early years, we were 5 people out there doing stuff. And as the 5 of us figured out systems and learned how to do stuff, that information stayed in the farm, and it just kept being accumulated. Whereas if we had been 2 people initially, and we hired 2 or 3 people, we could develop systems, but as these 2 or 3 people get good at what they're doing, there's a good chance there's a certain amount of turnover, and they leave with some of that capacity. And some of our early work would have been just on trying to rebuild that capacity regularly. Whereas with the co-op, we were able to keep that knowledge just longer and not have to always be starting over. And so that's kind of like an early phase. And at this point, what it's meant is that, though each of us now manages a specific part of the operation, a number of us have been involved in almost everything of the farm. And so if one of us had to be absent from the farm for any kind of reason, be it a short time, short like a vacation, or longer term for other reasons, the other co-op members have a lot of knowledge that they can take on the roles that other people have vacated, momentarily or longer, and it gives a certain resilience that wouldn't be there if it was just Emily and I, and we hired a harvest manager. That harvest manager might not be able to fill the roles that other people have, and that harvest manager might only be with us for 2 or 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, but it depends on a lot of different things. And so by building the co-op members, it is a bigger investment in people who are playing a longer game. And that means that there's less effort every year rebuilding the whole farm, the whole work team. So that means you can dedicate to other stuff and be bringing things forward. And then it also means that and it kind of overlaps with some of the, different people having different hats. If Emily and I were just the 2 of us owning the operation, even though there's certain people that we've hired to wear most of those hats most of the time, when things get tough, we would probably have to wear more hats. Whereas with the co-op, when things get tough, the hats are split between more people.
Right.
And that makes a real difference. And we've seen it from the beginning of the farm too. Like even since year 1, we've been taking everybody's been taking week-long vacations from the farm. They've been staggered all at one point. And since there's a few couples on the farm, people in the same couple will be leaving together. And so we've been able to have a better quality of life because we can get away from the farm more. We've been able to, really constrain so that we have I'm not sure, it depends on what year you're talking about, kind of like a 7 to 5 job as opposed to a 6 to 10 job. And we've just been able to have something that's more pleasant to work with. And for sure, we get stressed out at all times of the year. And, decision fatigue, like you mentioned, we suffer from that too. But I think we have a little bit more energy to get through because of the support network that the co-op creates.
I know that there are probably as many ways to set up cooperative farms as there are cooperative farms today. But do you have any recommended resources or things that you read or places that you will learn from how to go about setting up cooperative farms, or even that inform how you all run your farm and how you improve it on a yearly basis? Is there any resource that you go to?
Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for this one. It's been a challenge for us to find models and to find resources to really learn from. Like, for sure, just good business practices and business books and the like have a real impact, but they don't quite answer all the questions that we're looking for. And like, I know there's a lot more farming co-ops now, or co-op farms, than there was when we started. So we didn't have someone to look to. I think that I know the Greenhorns put out a little cooperative farming book that has some great thought that goes into it. And I think not specific to co-ops, but like doing work like holistic management to get common goals, or work like nonviolent communication, which is a communication theory, to learn how to speak to each other. These are things that can go a long way towards making sure that everybody's voice is heard and influences where the farm's going. I think that I know that there are starting to be I don't have any off the top of my head, but there's starting to be like Facebook groups and different groups of co-op farms that are communicating and talking. So those do exist. I guess one place that's a resource is there are different, in Canada, the provincial and federal organizations that work with co-ops and different kinds of co-ops, and I'm sure the same exists in the U.S., both sort of at a kind of a state level and a countrywide level. And so there are really big differences in farms from other businesses, but there's also a lot of similarities. And so just getting information from other co-ops, period, can help out. So those are kind of fantastic list of resources I can suggest.
Yeah, well, it seems to be a resurgent idea within farming. It would make sense that there's not a lot of tried and true expanded literature or discourse on best practices for operating, or places to start when operating a farming cooperative. But that's why I was really excited to get to talk to you, because you've been doing this for 15 years, which is, I think you all are definitely one of the longer successful farm cooperatives in this modern small-scale farming movement.
So I think one of the things about, so farming in general, I think people sometimes jump in too quickly, and I think it's worth starting small and getting bigger. I think it's also worth going and getting experience working on other farms before you start your own farm. It'll really make a big difference. And so I think that's true across the board, but I think it's even more true when you choose to farm with work partners, because like you have to not only figure out how you're going to farm, what tools you're going to have, the marketing and all that, but you also have to figure out how you're going to build a vision together. And it's really not, this is like our society doesn't teach people how to build collective visions. And so I think that like you really have to take the time to do that. And so I would say if you really want to start a farm co-op, maybe work a season or two on a co-op that already exists and see how they run the co-op and see what happens there, because it'll give you a lot of an idea about how communication can be, as opposed to just reading a book or listening to a podcast, even though there are some fantastic podcasts. But I think really doing it makes a difference. And I've seen that we had somebody who worked for us for a couple of years, and her and her friends, they wanted to start a co-op, and they've been talking about this and thinking about this for a number of years, like a number of years before they worked for us, and then even after they worked for us, they worked for a few years before they launched their co-op. And now I think they're in their second year, and it's been really interesting to see how they've launched it. So their name is Agricola. They're based sort of outside of Ottawa, but it's been really wild to watch how they've got up and going, because they did a lot of the work of learning how to communicate and kind of building a vision beforehand, as opposed to just jumping in. And I'm sure that there's all kinds of stuff that's happening once you actually start it. But taking that time, which is, I think, vital on any kind of operation, I think is extra important on a farm, because it's like getting married or starting a family with somebody. This is a longer-term commitment where the relationship you have with other people is really fundamental in the success. And so taking the time to do the relationship work to make sure that it works is going to go a really long way. And now we learned a lot in our early years, and there were some really tough times, but we also had worked before in university on different student groups, and a number of us had lived in a house together. There were 7 of us living in a house for a couple of years, kind of run sort of collectively. And so we had some experience with just working together before we started this farm. And I think that really helped out. Whereas if we had just been thrown together, maybe there's certain things that would have gone better, but I think that ultimately it's the work that you do on communication and the relationship as much as on the business development that makes it work.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a real pleasure interviewing you. I'm glad I finally get to be the one, talking to some of these folks, and it was great talking to you today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to talk at co-ops and to get a chance to talk with no-till growers again. I really love the podcast, and so it's an honor to be involved in this once more. So thank you so much.
All right, if you enjoyed that conversation, make sure to follow Dan and Tournesol on Instagram and all the places. We will hook it up with links in the show notes. Also, follow Jackson at Stonehouse Market Farm. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting it and leave some feedback. Rate and review it. Share it as well. All of those good things. Consider cruising over to patreon.com/FarmerJesse and kicking in a couple bucks. Would love to see that get up to about $2,500 going into the fall so we can do more for you, specifically in the video department. That's always the goal for us, to aggregate, get more information, more stuff that everyone can use. So big shout out to my team, Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin. Thank you to Hannah Crabtree for all her work behind the scenes. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.